All right. So this morning, first of all, I just want to mention for those who watch on YouTube, last week the audio went out about halfway through the talk, and I have reconstructed that audio from a backup file. I always record two things. You can never have enough audio backups, I think. Anyway, it's reconstructed. It's up on the YouTube channel now. So if you were watching last week and you lost audio halfway through, I'm very sorry for that. But you can go back up and just kind of fast forward to wherever you got cut off and pick up the rest of the talk. So today we're going to talk about the principles of successful living. Now, this is the title of a chapter in the Science of Mind textbook by Ernest Holmes. So I suggest that everyone break out your textbooks and read through this chapter and see what else jumps out at you after you've listened to this talk. It's also the title of a book by Raymond Charles Barker, who was the founding minister of the First Church Religious Science in New York City, and a very clear teacher, very, very powerful writer. And I think it's important that we talk about this now. We were talking about love last week. We were talking about the basic principles of science of mind all through the month of January. And I think we want to try to put this into a deeper perspective perhaps, or a different perspective of just what is it that we are all trying to do here together? What is it? So, of course, principles are like fundamental rules. There's principles of mathematics that guide us when we go into addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. There's certain things that you do. If you learn how to play a sport, there's certain principles about the rules of the sport and the techniques of the sport. In golf, they teach you your stance and your grip and your swing. Those are the fundamentals, and there's certain rules or principles about the way to do that and to do it right. So the title of the chapter and the title of the talk, Principles of Successful Living, it's making an assertion that there are certain fundamental rules that if we learn these fundamental rules, and if we execute them, if we abide by them, then we can experience whatever successful living is, whatever successful living means. But there's a need for clarification there, because in our world, in pop culture, in the way that things exist, the terms success and successful carry an entirely different meaning than the way Dr. Holmes is using success here. Now, in the back of the Science of Mind text, there is a glossary of terms. Not every term, but many of the terms that Dr. Holmes uses, he gives a definition of. And it's very useful when you're reading the Science of Mind textbook, when you come across a word, it's very useful to go back to the glossary and see just exactly the way he's using it at this time. When Lori and I were going through our ministerial training and preparing for the oral exams, the boards, which was the last step of the process, one of the things we had to do was we had to learn every one of those definitions, because that was like a pop quiz when you went before the board. They would say, well, how does Dr. Holmes, what does he mean when he says success? And we were expected to know that his definition of success is the favorable termination of anything attempted. The favorable termination of anything attempted. Now that's kind of different than what we get in the world. Success is kind of, score is kept by how much money you make, or what you've accomplished, or what you have built, or those kind of things. I remember when I was a manager in business, the people would get together and they would talk about how big their departmental budget was that they controlled and how many people reported to them. That was kind of the status symbol that they had. The bigger your budget and the more headcount you had, well, the more successful a manager you were. That's not necessarily true, but that's the way people thought. That's the pecking order that they established. So Dr. Holmes gives us a different definition. It's not about getting something. It's not about achieving anything. See? It is about a favorable completion or a termination. So you might infer from that then, well, something has to come to an end. Right? It's something that you attempted, something that you started, and it has ended, and it has ended favorably. It has ended favorably. He didn't say that you made a lot of money at it. He didn't say that you built a tall building. He didn't say that you had the tallest headstone in a cemetery. He didn't say that hundreds of people came out to your funeral and made a public display of emotion. Didn't say any of those things. As a matter of fact, what he says in this chapter, and this is why I think it's a good chapter to read, is that all that life requires of us and expects of us is to live. Is to live. He says it's not necessary that when we die we leave anything at all behind. It's not necessary that if when we die that anybody even takes notice. That's not important. And you can see that that's greatly in opposition to the way of the world, to the way that pop culture brews it. Culture describes it, excuse me. And notice that he uses the word favorable. Favorable. He doesn't say you got what you wanted. He doesn't say everything came out exactly as you predicted. He says it was favorable. It was a favorable termination to anything attempted. Now, in his definition of favorable, it means favorable for everyone concerned, the highest good of all. That would be favorable. And again, we have to go back and say, well, this is kind of different than the way the world might look at things. In the ways of the world, somebody who becomes fabulously wealthy and they do it by taking advantage of other people, they might be considered a success in the ways of the world. Well, they got a lot of money, and those other people should not have let someone take advantage of them. And you remember the famous speech Michael Douglas gave in the movie Wall Street. Greed is good because it weeds out the weak businesses and helps make business better. And all of these different things. But that's not what Dr. Holmes is talking about. He's talking about what is in the highest good of all. And in the very, very first page of this chapter, he says, we're not telling you that you can get whatever you want. Because sometimes what you want would be hurtful to others. Sometimes what you want would be hurtful to yourself. What we want is what is favorable. What we want is what is in the highest good for all concerned. So that's one of the first principles, right? One of the first rules that we have to learn is I only want what is best for everyone. I only want what is in the highest good of all. I don't want my whatever it is, whatever I desire, I don't want it at anyone else's expense. I don't want my good by taking my good from someone else. Many years ago, Lori and I were at a workshop for trainers and speakers over in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And there was an amazing man there who got up to speak. And he was a disabled vet. He had been wounded in Vietnam, and he had a tough time mobility. He had a tough time walking around. He used a little scooter most of the time. But he was a fantastic speaker, and he had this wonderful positive outlook on life. He just saw how good life could be. And his wife was a real estate broker in Atlanta, and he worked with her, but he was not a real estate broker or a real estate agent. He was her trainer, and he would train her sales force. He would put on programs about selling techniques and positive attitude and how to stay motivated and all of these things to help the sales force better do their jobs. And she had the agency that she had developed and became one of, if not the largest agencies in that area, whatever area around Atlanta they were in at the time. And he said they had the association of realtors had a party out at the country club, and it was just kind of a meet and greet. And one of his wife's competitors came up to him and said, he says, I would just love to know what it is that you're doing for your wife's sales agency. He says, and I would love for you to come and do it for mine. And the guy pulled out his calendar and he said, well, let's pick a date and let's do it. And the other fellow said, are you kidding me? I'm in competition with your wife's business. Why would you come and help me to take away business from her? And the guy's answer was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. He said, sir, he says, the way you're looking at it is the pie is finite. And the only way you're going to increase your business is by taking away somebody else's piece of the pie. He says, the way I look at life is that we can work together and we can grow this pie bigger for everyone. He says, so your success does not have to be at the expense of someone else. And he did. He went and he put on training programs for this man who was coming from a mindset of, we have to compete, we have to take from one another, we have to struggle, we have to fight. And he went in and said, no, we don't. We have to find a way to make it better for everyone. So this is what I think Dr. Holmes is talking about. We have to switch our mindset from the ways of the world. And we have to start looking at, well, what is this thing that I wish? What is this thing that I wish to do? What is this thing that I wish to experience? And what is a way to do it that is for the highest good of everyone concerned? Now, there's certain other things that are kind of embedded in this very simple definition, the favorable termination of anything attempted. We have to attempt. You have to attempt. What happens if you don't attempt anything? Okay? By that definition, you could never be successful. You could be successful at nothing, What was the song, Bachman Turner Overdrive? Doing nothing all day. I work hard doing nothing all day. We don't want to work hard doing nothing all day. We don't want to work hard at all. But we want to attempt. We want to attempt. So we want to come back then to this idea of, for a little bit, we need to come back to this idea of what is life and what is our purpose in life. And then what does this mean to attempt, and how do we go about attempting it? And how do we cooperate? And perhaps cooperate is a key word to keep in mind for today. You and I are not trying to manipulate. We're not trying to coerce. We're not trying to force. We're not trying to do anything like that. We are trying to cooperate. We're trying to cooperate with the way life works and our position in life. That is all we are trying to do, but we're trying to do it consciously, deliberately, aware of, You could say that while we were asleep, we are cooperating with the way that life works, but we're usually not lucid. We're usually not aware of the fact that we were asleep and we were dreaming. We can be. That takes some practice. But usually we are not aware of that. And what I'm talking about here is lucid, living lucidly, living aware, living alive, living alert, living enthusiastically, excited about getting up in the morning, excited about doing the things that we need to do during the day, excited about going to bed and getting a good night's rest so we have enough energy to get up tomorrow and to just go love some more, to just go sing some more and dance some more and be joy some more. Can we be alive? Can we be alive? I get the image in Young Frankenstein with the Gene Wilder. It's alive, it's alive. Can we feel that aliveness? Can we feel that beingness Can we feel that joy? So think of the parable in the New Testament that says, don't worry about the ordinary things. Remember the disciples were talking to Jesus, and he was saying, throw down your nets and come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men, or something like that. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing, but I think if you want to find that, you can go to the concordance on the internet, and you can find that passage. And the disciples were saying, well, wait, we'd love to go and follow you. We would love to go and just study these religious ideas with you, and all of the things you're talking about, they're beautiful. But, we're practical people. We have boats that need to be repaired. We have nets that we need to mend. We have families that we need to feed. We have bills to pay. We've got mortgage and rents and taxes and all of these things. And the answer was, don't you think that the Father in heaven knows what you need before you ask? Consider the lilies of the field and the birds in the air. They don't work, they don't toil, they don't sow, they don't reap, but they are adorned more beautifully than even Solomon's temple. They're provided for. When you ask for all of these things, ask believing in your heart that they are done, and they shall be done. So what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? And how does that parable, how does that fit into our purpose of life? How does that fit into the livingness? And if you think of the birds in the air, and if you think of the lilies of the field, what are they doing? What are they doing? They are doing exactly what they came here to do. No more, no less. No struggle, no competition, Can you imagine how silly it would be if the lilies popped up out of the ground and turned and looked at one another and said, well, I'm a better looking lily than you are, or I'm a taller lily than you are, or my colors are brighter than your colors. They're just lilies. They're just lilies. They just do what they came to do, and they are cared for. They are provided for. That's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. They don't have to work hard at it. They don't have to struggle. They just live the life that they came to live. Now, when I'm sitting here, like now, I'm sitting here on Sunday, and I turn my eyes this way, I'm looking out. There's a sliding glass door that goes out onto our deck, and in the wooded yard. We've got an acre here, and every house in this development has an acre of land. So we've got a mixture of, woods and lawns and shrubbery and all kinds of things. And one night I was sitting here and I looked out the window and I saw something move, and I just caught a glimpse of it. It looked like it was a very, very big dog, So I stood up so I could see over the hedge that's right outside the window. It was a beautiful deer, beautiful deer. I think it was a doe. It didn't have antlers. It was beautiful. It probably, if I could go stand next to it, it would probably come halfway up my chest. And it was just gracefully walking through the yard, and it stopped, and it would nibble off of this bush. It would nibble off of that bush. It was in absolutely no hurry. Didn't seem to be, feel the least bit out of place. The fact that it was standing in a yard, in a housing development, I suppose it came from either the creek or the power lines, which run alongside on either side of the development, and the animals can freely move up and down either one. But it was just here. It was just here. I don't even know, what level of awareness it might have to the fact that it was here. It was just being a deer. And from my perspective, it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. How perfectly shaped its body is. How beautiful everything moved, how powerful its legs were. You could look at it and just know that this deer could probably jump up onto the roof of the shed in one leap if it wanted to. And all it was doing was being a deer. And it was provided for. So my point is that the lilies of the field, the birds in the air, the deer in the forest, they're born into this life. They live this life according to their instinct. As far as we know, we don't know that they are consciously aware of their own thought process. This is something that we as human beings are. But as far as we know, no other species is capable of self-reflection. Something guides these creatures, these plants and animals, something guides them every day, you know. I love the pictures, the time-lapse pictures of the fields of sunflowers, and you can watch the heads of the sunflowers turn and track the sun as the sun moves across the sky in the day. We used to have grapevines in one of the yards, one of our houses. And sometimes we'd go out and tie the grapevines up to the trellis, and the leaves would kind of get all twisted around. And within a very short time of a couple hours, the leaves had rotated themselves back around so that the darker green side was facing the sun. Something in that vine, probably working on chemistry, but something knew exactly what to do for it to receive the sunlight, the good that has already been given. It was already there. So one of these principles of the secrets of successful living, right? So successful living, the favorable termination of anything attempted, successful, and living, being alive, being consciously aware, being alive, and living the life that we came here to live. And the clue is, it's not about getting. It's not about dying with the most toys or leaving the largest chunk of money. It's about learning what we are here for, and then attempting every day, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more today than yesterday. Can I live life a little bit more fully today than I did yesterday? Can I live life a little bit more aware today than I was aware yesterday? See, we're born into this world, and very quickly we are given the rules of the world, and we're told what we need to do, and to get up and get dressed and get on the school bus and go to school and come home and do our homework and then graduate and then get a job and then do what the job requires. And from the moment it seems that we come into the world until the moment we leave, we're being told all of these different things to do, and we do them. But how often are we consciously aware? How often do we stop? I mean, we get up in the morning, the clock goes off, and immediately we start thinking about all the things we're supposed to do today. You know, oh, I got to write this letter. I got to make this phone call. I got to read this report. I got to turn in these forms. I got to do this. I got to do that. And immediately, we're not even out of bed yet, and immediately our to-do list starts flashing before our minds, or before, as the consciousness philosopher calls it, before a working memory. We become aware. And when we do that, we're not really doing what we're capable of doing. I don't think we're really doing what we came here to do. So the one thing that we can do, we as human beings can do, that as far as we know, no other species does, but I've got money riding on the dolphins. I think if anything can do it, they will, is to be consciously aware, to think about what we're thinking about. To reflect upon thought. What is it? Where does it come from? Where does it go? To reflect upon life. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? To reflect upon the things that we desire. Are they for the highest good of all? And to reflect upon purpose. So I think if we can come to an understanding of purpose, our spiritual purpose of being here, then the rest of attempting things that are for the highest good of all, that help us to grow more fully into fulfilling our purpose, then it all starts to make sense. So we consider then, what are we? And why are we here? And the best that we can kind of understand, the best that we can consider at this time, and remember, our intellect, our finite minds, are not capable of understanding that which is infinite. We cannot understand that which was never born and shall never die. We cannot understand that which is all-powerful. So there's kind of a description that we have that we know is incomplete at best. But it's kind of our working description. You know, I like movies, and sometimes you'll see on the credits that this is a working title production, you know. And the reason for that is sometimes when they're making a movie, they don't really know what the final title is going to be, so they give it a working title. And then after the film is shot and the marketing people get a hold of it and say, how are we going to position this in the marketplace, then they might come up with a different title. So we have a working description, but as we grow, that working description evolves. I love what Joel Goldsmith tells us about consciousness unfolding. We are unfolding. You and I, as consciousness, we are unfolding. And part of our purpose is to unfold a little bit more every day. So we know that we did not create ourselves. And we believe that we have been created by this one life, this one perfect life, as its instrument, as its expression of life, so that it might express, experience, and enjoy its own life as us, through us, more fully, more fully. That puts a totally different spin on our day, doesn't it? Instead of waking up in the morning and saying, oh my God, you know, the clock just went off and I've got to hurry, I got to get the subway or the bus, I got to get on the traffic, which route should I take, you know, and I got to make 10 phone calls as soon as I get to the office, and I got a meeting at 9 o'clock, and instead of doing all of those things, we can stop and reflect and say to ourselves, the purpose of life, living itself as me, is to express, to experience, and to enjoy itself. How are we going to do that today? How are we going to do that today? Not how am I going to make it happen today, not how am I going to struggle today, but how am I going to cooperate with the divine love that is already there. See, that it's already there. It's the gifts have already been given. It is already there. And what we are doing is we are choosing choosing to be consciously aware of it and to cooperate with it more fully. When our kids were little and playing Little League baseball, somebody had a boom box over on the bench, and in between the innings they would crank it up and they would play John Fogerty. Put me in, coach. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play today. And all the kids, little kids over at the bench, they would all get up and dance and sing, "Put me in, coach." They all wanted to play. Can we get out of bed in the morning? Put me in, coach. Put me in, sweet Lord. I am ready today to grow in conscious awareness of my role as your instrument of love, as your instrument of peace, as your instrument of joy. For this purpose, I have come. Now, one of the clues of the way that we can do this is, what is it that we can do that nothing else that we know of can do? And that is to reflect upon our thoughts. So as the lilies of the field do what the lilies can do, as the birds of the air do what the birds of the air can do, as the deer walking through my yard does what the deer can do, how much time do we spend doing that which uniquely we can do? How much time do we spend catching ourselves in the process of becoming entangled with our thoughts? Catching ourselves in the process of just accepting what comes along as if it is true, and then acting it out, acting upon it. An angry thought comes by and we think we must be angry, so we behave as if we're angry. A hungry thought comes by and we go, "Ooh, I'm hungry." The TV puts up a picture of some appetizing food, and even though we've just eaten supper, we think, "Ooh, boy, that looks good." Part of our growth is to become aware of the fact that we don't have to react and respond to every thought that goes through our heads. Not only are we able to choose, but we are responsible for choosing which thoughts we will interact with, which emotions we will interact with. And I think that's probably the first big step for anyone along the spiritual path, is to recognize I am not the thoughts that go through my head. I am not the emotions that I become aware of. I am the one witnessing them. I am the one becoming aware of them. I am here to observe them and to choose, and like the commercial says, to choose wisely. To choose wisely. I don't want that experience. I don't want that in my life today. I'm not going to interact with that. What is it you're going to attempt today? What is it you're going to attempt? So the other inference in that statement is you must attempt. You must choose. The divine is not going to do for you what it created you to do. You have been created to choose a unique and wonderful way to let this life express through you. But you must choose. You can't sit back and say, "Oh, I'm not going to choose. I'm not going to decide. I'm going to let God decide for me." See, God cannot do for you what God created you to do for yourself. If you choose not to choose, you have made a choice. You have made a choice to just accept whatever comes along, to just accept whatever is going on in your subconscious mind and let the law that does it to you according to your belief produce a perfect outpicturing of what's in your subconscious. That's what you're choosing when you choose not to choose. So you must choose. You must choose. And here's where it all starts to tie together. So we know that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. We call this the law of mind. And Dr. Holmes said that one of the dangers is that we tend to think, well, I can use this to get all kinds of stuff. I can use this to get a new car and a new house. and lots of money and a better job and all those things. And that's true. That is absolutely true that we can do those things. But we don't want to get hung up on getting. We don't want to get hung up on those things because that is not the real purpose of the law. The real purpose of the law is the law helps us to remove the blocks, the barriers, and the boundaries in our consciousness that serve temporarily to restrict our experience. In other words, what we're doing every day is we are growing more fully in our awareness, of our conscious awareness, Dr. Holmes tells us, of the experience of the presence of God. The presence of God is already here. The presence of God is already perfect. God is not going to make more stuff because we pray in the right way. God is not going to take anything away from anybody and give it to us because we begged or pleaded or beseeched. But what we can do is we can remove whatever blocks, barriers, and boundaries as they might exist in consciousness that are interfering with our experience of the good that has already been given. So our spiritual practice then, and our desires and the things that we attempt, what we are doing is we are using the law of mind to produce a change in our consciousness. And every day that change leads us into a deeper experience of the love and the presence of God. See, Dr. Holmes tells us with all our getting, we must first get God. We have to bring our consciousness more fully into alignment with what God is and the way God works and who we are and why we're here. And when we do that, then changes take place in our lives. We are creating the avenue within our own consciousness through which the demonstration can be made. Remember that. We're not trying to change anybody else. We're not trying to force anybody else to do anything. We are producing a change, an avenue within our own consciousness through which the good that already is, the peace that already is, the love, the prosperity, all of these things that are appropriate for this life, all of these things may then flow, may flow through us. Right? And again, not for the purpose of hoarding, not for the purpose of getting, but for the purpose of expressing life. How will we share life today? How will we share love today? How will we express more fully today? So this then kind of helps us to understand, what is it that I wish to attempt? What is it that I wish to attempt? If I wish to live successfully, I want to do everything that I do from the purpose of living the life that I came here to live. And that life is a life of growing in awareness every day of the spiritual nature of the universe and my role in it, my place in it. See, everything here is turning to dust. So there's no sense putting a lot of effort into trying to accumulate all kinds of things that are going to turn to dust. Why? Why bother, I think I told you this one time. I was officiating a graveside service. And as we were leaving the cemetery, they had different sections and the headstones were bigger. So you had some stones were kind of at the level of the ground and some were kind of tipped up and, maybe 18 inches high. And then some were even bigger and some had big, like steeples on them. And then as you drove through the more expensive part of the cemetery, they had mausoleums and they had buildings. And even in death, there seemed to be a competition. My headstone's taller than yours. Now I realize that people see that as an expression of love. That they love their loved ones and they want to show respect to them. But I also realize that all of that's turning to dust. Someday this tectonic plate will go back into the core of the earth and everything will be turned back into magma, into liquid. Someday the sun will go supernova and this entire planet will be gone. Someday The galaxy will be gone. It is all turning to dust. What is important then? And what is important is life. It is living, because life and living goes beyond this experience. We will constantly be growing in awareness of what God is and what we are and how it is expressing its life through us. So we want to do the thing that we can do, which is to reflect upon our thoughts, to be consciously aware, to deliberately choose something that is for the highest good of all, to choose some way that we wish to dissolve the barriers in our consciousness so that we might experience more of God. That's the purpose, so that we might experience more of God. Not so that I get more stuff, so that I experience more of God. So the principles then are very simple. You have to understand who and what you are. An expression of the living God who is here for the purpose of expressing God's love in some unique and wonderful way. That's a good working title. That's a good definition to start with. And the way that I must do that is entirely through consciousness. I have to practice my meditation to learn how to detach myself from all of the junk that floats through my field of awareness. I have to learn how to choose those things that are for the highest good of all. I have to attempt to grow today, every day, more fully in some particular way by choosing a way that I will grow, whether that be through demonstrating more prosperity in my life, through demonstrating greater health in my life, through demonstrating greater loving relationships, friends, family, through demonstrating a job that is fulfilling, a job that I can understand how this particular job that I'm in is for the highest good of all. And as we choose that, see, this is my attempt. My attempt today is to grow in consciousness, to be more fully aligned with the self-expression of God. As I choose that, then I deliberately cooperate with the way life works. I deliberately cooperate with the law of mind. I sit down and I deliberately take time to set my intention into the law, to do my spiritual mind treatment, to get the snowball rolling down the hill, to use the power of thought. I think somewhere Holmes calls treatment spiritual thought force. To use the power of deliberately choosing to produce the change in my consciousness through which the demonstration of the law is made. And because of that, I experience more of God, because the ignorance that have served to separate me from the gifts that have already been given is to some degree dissolved. Now, you don't have to worry about where the ignorance came from. You don't have to sit there and worry about, well, where did I get these limiting ideas in the first place? That's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. It is like going into a room that is dark and standing there saying, who pulled the curtains? Who turned out the light switch? Why is this room dark? I can't do anything about it until I know who pulled the curtains, who turned out the light switch. Well, of course you can. Just go turn the light on. Turn the light on so you can see what you're doing, and then go open the curtains. That's all you got to do. You don't have to worry about how it got that way. Do what you are capable of doing to change it. That's what you must do. Joel Goldsmith says, don't ever personalize evil. Don't ever accept it personally. If someone is sick, we don't have to say, oh, well, why did they accept these ideas of sickness? He says, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. He says, we're all kind of swimming in the muck of race consciousness, the muck of human consciousness. And that's all we need to know. The answer is not to find out who put sickness into the muck and why some of it got on us. The answer is to turn our attention entirely to God, because God has never been sick. God is unaffected by the muck. Divine love brought us here, but had to leave us ignorant to some degree so that we could develop our own unique personality. We could develop our own unique way of expressing God's life and God's love. That's all. That's all we need to worry about. And every day we just throw that off a little bit more. So the principles of successful living start with understanding what living is. Expressing the life of the love that sent us here. And then cooperating with the way it works by only wanting those things that are for the highest good of all. By deliberately choosing what it is that we wish to experience. By recognizing that the way that it comes about is through a change in our consciousness that we put into motion through a practice we call spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer, if you're more comfortable with that. And then we accept. You see, we have to accept. Jesus told the disciples, the Father, the Spirit, knows what you need before you ask. Ask believing in your heart. Ask believing in your heart that it is so and it shall be done. Why do they have to ask? If God already knows what they want, why do they have to ask? Because acceptance is a requirement. It is one of the principles. It is one of the rules. So I invite you this day, please get a hold of the textbook and go back and read that chapter. It starts on page 266. You might even find a copy of Raymond Charles Barker's book in a bookstore on Amazon, The Principles of Successful Living. Do you wish to live successfully? Your first choice. Do you wish to live successfully, or you just want to exist? Do you know what living is? Do you know what living means? Do you know what success is? Do you know what success means? Do you know the rules of the game? Do you know the principles of successful living? And if you take time to reflect upon all those things, ask yourself, well, how much time do I really spend being consciously aware of the thoughts that are passing through my field of awareness? How much time do I really spend deliberately choosing the experience that I invite God to have as me today and through me today? How much time do I spend letting go of things that don't matter? Old opinions, old beliefs, old prejudices, old ideas. And then eventually we come to the point where the time that we spend is simply, as Dr. Holmes tells us, being at home with the beloved. Simply living in the conscious awareness of the experience of the presence of God. Why are we here? Why are we anywhere? Why are we? To grow every day in our conscious awareness of the experience of the presence of God. And if we will learn and follow these principles for successful living, we can do and we can be just that. And so it is.